A few days ago, I uploaded my unboxing of the Monolith M1070. A subscriber mentioned that there might be an issue with the 1570's mini XLR wiring, which may cause an overcurrent error with some amplifiers when the M1570 is used with third-party cables. I have contacted Monolith and have been in touch with the production manager of Monolith products. He sent me the mini XLR schematics today. We are trying to set up a telephone conversation tomorrow. I will upload a video afterwards, and I hope it will help shed some light on the purported overcurrent issue. I will note that this overcurrent complaint apparently does not occur with the standard cable that is shipped with the headphones. Monolith is facing a problem. It's called a hi-fi manufacturer brick wall. This brick wall has been built over time by big-name brands that understandably protect their intellectual properties, but their desire to protect their technology to barely innovate keeps things stagnant for long periods, and it increases cost for the consumer because if all the big-name brands do the same thing, there isn't enough competition to drive down price. Monolith wants to break through this wall. This is the Monolith by Monoprice M1070. It is the next generation of planar magnetic headphone. It currently sits in the middle of the Monolith line, above the M1060 and below the M1570. It costs $400, which is $200 less than the flagship M1570. Let's take a closer look. At first glance, you'd think that the M1070 looks exactly like the M1570. Yes, it does have a striking similarity. In fact, if you put both side by side, you would not be able to immediately distinguish them. There are, however, some notable differences. The M1070 does not have mini XLR cable inputs. Instead, the 1070 uses 3.5mm jacks. If you recall, the M1060 uses 2.5mm jacks. The M1070 also weighs about 3 ounces lighter than the M1570. The two headphones have different grills. The M1570 has a totally redesigned grill which looks pretty stealth to me. The M1070 borrows the grills from the M1060 and apparently can be swapped if you desire. And, well, that's it. The two headphones have the same frequency response, from 5Hz to 50,000 Hz. Both have the same THD of less than 0.1% at 100 decibels. Both have 106mm planar magnetic drivers at 60 ohms. Both are open back. The most obvious question is, what is Monolith doing? Why is Monolith selling two headphones with the exact same frequency response, impedance, driver size, and nearly identical size and weight? Well, that's a logical question. The marketing on the M1070 and M1570 web pages look eerily similar. For both, Monolith says that the headphones have dual linear symmetry magnet array to deliver amazing sound quality, and the headphones have fantastic high-end extension combined with tight, clean bass. Monolith says that both headphones have open, airy, spacious Soundstage. Both headphones come with two ear pads, lambskin and velour. I'm a bit confused, to be honest. Monolith says that the M1570 is different from the M1070. They say the magnet structure, tuning, and driver are different. Monolith also emphasizes that the drivers for the M1070 are in fact different from the M1060. So, the M1060, M1070, and M1570 all have different elements. It appears that the M1060 and 1070 share nothing really in common. They each have different drivers, different impedances, different build, different tuning. However, we do not yet know if this all equates to a different sound signature from the M1060. Indeed, people have asked on Monoprice's website for more information, but have not yet received a response about what the actual sound differences are between the 1060 and the 1070. Speaking of sound, let's talk about sound. You know, when I realized that the web pages for the M1070 and 1570 were essentially identical, I kind of rolled my eyes. I was a little skeptical about the claims because it made no sense to me. I figured someone just copied and pasted the contents of the 1570 webpage onto the 1070 webpage. But it seems that both headphones do indeed have similar sonic abilities. For example, both the 1570 and 1070 supposedly have extended soundstage. I said in the 1570 unboxing that those headphones appear to have a very large soundstage consistent with the marketing. Well, I'd say that the M1070 isn't far behind. It too has a large soundstage, though a bit more closed off than the M1570. I think the 1070 certainly has above average soundstage, to say the least. If you watch my channel, you know I conduct thorough tests before reaching a conclusion. That will happen with the M1570 and 1070. We will compare these headphones A and B along with many other relevant comparisons. But I can give you my initial impressions of the M1070. My initial sound impressions are based on about 2 hours of listening with the M1070 and Monolith Liquid Spark. First, the M1070 does feel a little lighter. When you deal with headphones that weigh almost 1.5 pounds, saving a few ounces is noticeable in my opinion. Second, both headphones have the same build quality. Both have metal and leather components. Both feel sturdy. Third, my first few hours with the 1070 suggest these are slightly warmer sounding than the 1570. The slightly more closed-off soundstage of the 1070 contributes to this effect. Fourth, the bass in the 1070 seems to have different tuning. There is a slight bump in the sub-bass, which is not quite as clear as in the 1570. I also think that the 1570 has slightly faster bass transients. The 1070 has slightly more muddy bass, with the sub-bass and mid-bass melding slightly, and more so than with the 1570. This should not be taken as a negative, however. Despite the melding of the bass frequency, there is no distortion. I think the 1570 sounds clearer in the bass frequency overall. The 1070 has longer bass resonance. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, for example, when the crescendo hits, the organ frequency and sub-bass rumble lingers longer than on the 1570. That extra resonance in the 1070 has a somewhat boomy effect, close to how I recall hearing the song in the theater while watching the movie. When there is sub-bass and impact, you can feel the air being pushed inside the ear cup. It's not distracting or uncomfortable, simply a characteristic. In the song Pure Water, the bass sounds a bit more impactful and has a slightly longer resonance than it does on the 1570. The mids, however, sound clear, though not quite as clear as with the 1570. There is a slight difference. Speaking of mids, the 1070 has no distortion there either. The bass does not seem to outdo the mids. The mids typically sound about 2 steps ahead of the rest of the mix on our imaginary soundstage. In the song Want You Back, all 3 vocalists were clearly audible with their individual tonalities. Even when the guitar, piano, and drum are playing, all 3 vocalists retain their individuality. That is, when everything in the mix is playing, I could hear each singer's voice separately. I think it would be a tough call for me to say that the 1570 separates these vocalists better than the 1070. It's pretty close. The vocals do not sound harsh. There is a bit of graininess, however. It's not distracting. Instead, this graininess adds a bit of visceralness to the voices. You can hear the sharp intake of breath when it happens, and female voices sound crystal clear with their sibilants. In comparison, the M1570 seems to lack the noticeable grain and sounds just a tiny bit smoother. Speaking of sibilants and treble, there is definitely energy in the mix. The 1070 do not smooth out the treble. I hear just a tiny bit more treble energy in the 1070 than in the 1570. I might venture to say that the 1070 treble is pretty similar by memory to the Focal Elex. The treble is not harsh or ear-piercing at normal volumes. I listened to Scherzo for X-Wings at 25% volume on the Liquid Spark, and everything sounded well controlled. When I increased the volume to 50%, the horns and brass instruments suddenly had more obvious treble energy. Keep in mind that 50% volume is very loud for these headphones. That extra bit of treble energy was just below my personal threshold. This obviously will vary from person to person. However, I can say without hesitation that the 1070 performs noticeably different from the LCD-1, which has a significant smoothing effect all across the frequency range. Consequently, where you might think that the LCD-1 is lacking treble energy, the 1070 might have plenty for your tastes. As I listened for 2 hours, I kept wondering if there were any differences between the 1070 and 1570. I don't think that a few hours of listening is sufficient to tell unless the headphones are vastly different. For example, it would take me probably a few moments to conclude that the HD800S is sonically different in every way to the AudioQuest Nighthawk. Both headphones were designed for different purposes, and it shows. But other times it is hard to tell the difference. The difference in sound between the LCD3 and LCD4, for example, are terribly slight. Similarly, you would have a hard time telling the difference between the Chord Mojo and the iFi IDSD Black Label. So, with that in mind, can I say that the 1070 and 1570 are night and day different like the 800S and the Nighthawk? I don't think so. In my opinion, the differences are not that momentously obvious that I would be forced to say that the 1070 and 1570 sound completely different from each other. I don't think that's the case. In fact, going back and forth, I can hear that there is consistent tuning. This does not mean that they both sound the same. They don't. Rather, I get the initial impression that the 1570 adds nuance and separation to the 1070 sound. It's like taking an architect's plans and making adjustments to conform to your needs. The majority of the house will look the same at the end, but you might have widened a hallway and added a door or two and made a bigger kitchen counter. Although these changes to the plans will be meaningful, they would not alter the dimensions of the house so much that the architect would say it's not his work. That's what I mean when I say the 1070 and the 1570 are similar. There is a positive and negative to this application of minor change. The positive is that there will be a consistent idea of the house sound signature. Most manufacturers do have a house sound. ZMF is the only company I know of for sure that does not have a particular house sound. Monolith seems to have a coherent sound signature, which means if you have heard one of their other headphones, you will have a fair idea how all of the headphones will generally sound. The negative is that having a house sound signature limits the experimentation and leads to hardly noticeable differences amongst headphones. Think of Sennheiser and Audeze. Sennheiser's HD500 series are not easily distinguishable amongst each other. The changes are very minute. And Audeze's LCD3 and LCD4 sound so much alike that you would be confused in a blind test. Is the same true for the 1070 and the 1570? I cannot say just yet. Although I can clearly hear a consistent sound signature, I'm not ready to say that there is no difference. In fact, I would say that there is in fact a difference, a noticeable one. Whether that difference justifies the $200 price difference is something we will have to explore at length. So, here we are. Monoprice now has the M1060, the M1070, and the M1570. Are these supposed to be their versions of the LCD2, 3, and LCD4? I think it is safe to say that Monolith's first experiment with the M1060 was not exactly a home run. The M1060 has some flaws with its build. Its headband and limitless swiveling ear cups are frustrating, though not deal breakers. Moreover, the initial batch of headphones for the M1060 needed some additional tuning, which was implemented in the version 2 of the 1060s and the 1060C. Moreover, the M1060 do not really compete with the LCD2. The sound signatures are different enough to say that the headphones are competitors of different perspectives. The 1060 does not mimic the LCD2 enough to say that you should buy it as the cheaper LCD2 sound. Does the M1070 try to fix that discrepancy? Is Monoprice now signaling more concerted effort to uncurl Audeze's grip over the planar magnetic headphones? It would make sense if that were the case. Monoprice has refreshed the Monolith line. It has released 3 new headphones at once, the M570, 1070, and 1570. They all share very similar designs, which are completely different from anything that Monoprice introduced before. They all use new drivers, they all have different tuning. Is this Monoprice saying they are now ready to take the fight directly to Audeze? Before, it was an argument about allegedly stealing Audeze's planar technology and design. But now, this could be something different. These are the questions I pose and intend to answer. Is the M1070 the direct competitor to the LCD2? Is the M1570 the direct competitor to the LCD3 or LCD4? I think there is no correlation between paying more and getting better sound. That's a myth audio companies want to keep perpetuating. If it is possible that the M1070 and 1570 come oh so close to their Audeze counterparts, what then? If with the Monolith headphones you can get 95% of the sound of the much pricier Audeze versions, Is the extra 5% worth the $1,500 to $2,500 price increase for the Audeze headphones? That extra 5% difference would mean you're paying $300 to $500 per percentage point of, quote, better sound. This, of course, is currently only speculation. It is entirely possible that Monolith headphones won't be able to compete with the Audeze lineup. However, if it turns out that the M1070 or the M1570 are sonically indistinguishable from Audeze headphones, that will be a very welcome surprise indeed. For everyone except Audeze.